Are poor financial decisions holding your business back? Well, you are not alone. 60% of UK businesses admit that bad spending decisions comes from a lack of collaboration. It is a common problem, but the solution is much simpler than you think. Pleo's Finance and Business Synergy report reveals how smarter collaboration between finance and other departments leads to better decision-making, stronger financial resilience, and ultimately business growth. With 76% of UK businesses agreeing that spend management platforms drive effective teamwork, it's clear that the right tools can make the difference. Packed with insights from over 2,800 finance leaders across Europe, this report is a must-read for any businesses looking to optimize spend and unlock new opportunities. Download the Finance and Business Synergy report at pleo.io/11FS to see how better collaboration leads to better decision-making and how better decision-making ultimately leads to better business results.
It's back. The 2025 edition of our annual Pulse report, where we unveil and break down the best user experience financial services has to offer, is out now. Our experts have been busy researching and analysing product experiences from every corner of financial services, from crypto to inclusive design. Find out who were named our Pulse Stars, the best of the best from 2024. Read our highlights from the state of UX in the industry. And discover the bold predictions that our experts have made for the year ahead. Visit 11fs.com/report to download your copy. Hello and welcome to FinTech Insider Insights, this week in association with Pleo. I'm Benjamin Ensor, Director of Research and Strategy at 11FS. In this episode, we'll be focusing on one of the most important, but often underappreciated aspects of any organisation: the collaboration between the finance teams and the rest of the business. Finance teams are often viewed as the gatekeepers of budgets and numbers, the guardians of growth. But what's really going on behind the spreadsheets? To help us uncover the truth, we've partnered with Pleo, which has commissioned and published some fascinating research with nearly 3,000 medium-sized businesses across 7 European countries to find out what finance teams across a wide variety of industries are really thinking and how better collaboration can unlock growth and success for everyone. So I'm joined by a great panel of guests to learn more. First of all, we have a FinTech Insider debut for Søren Lonning, Chief Financial Officer at Pleo. Welcome to the show. Please, would you tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit about what you do at Pleo?
Yes, sure, Benjamin. Thank you very much. So the last 10 years, I've been a CFO of various companies. You can say my background is more in the commercial and business part of finance. So I've worked in consulting with McKinsey. I worked in PE before moving into finance over time. And I've been a CFO of major companies, listed companies, PE-led companies, and I've also been CFO of smaller companies. So I tried different sizes and different ownership structures. And the last 9 months, I've been CFO at Pleo, where I'm responsible for the usual disciplines like finance, legal, strategy, procurement, IR, these kind of disciplines. And the core mission of what I'm doing is, driving, scaling the company in an efficient manner, while also maturing the foundation of the company to be IPO ready at some point.
Fantastic. Well, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And we also have a warm return to the podcast for Betsy Samuel, Chief Marketing Officer at Thread. Welcome back to the show, Betsy. For listeners who didn't catch the previous episodes you've been on, could you tell them a little bit about you and a little bit about Thread, please?
Super. Thanks, Benjamin. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. As you mentioned, I am the CMO at Thread, the Chief Marketing Officer. And Thread is a global issuer processor. We enable our clients around the world, such as from Zilch in the UK to Leon and BigPay in Asia Pacific, and now B4B and Spendbase in the US to be able to utilize card products to bring their particular visions to life. So I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Welcome back. And we're also delighted to have another FinTech Insider debut, this time for Jovi Overo, Chief Executive Officer of Volt. It's really great to have you join us, Jovi. Please, would you tell our listeners a little bit about you and a little bit about Volt?
Super. Thanks, Benjamin. And I have watched this podcast many times, so I'm very happy to be on it for the first time. It's great to be here. So I'm Jovi Overo, CEO of Volt. And Volt, we are a crypto-powered, banking as a service provider. So essentially, we allow companies to launch their own branded crypto-friendly digital payments infrastructure, which includes cards, payment accounts, and crypto wallets in days at a fraction of the cost and the legal complexities of going it alone. So ultimately, we make it 10 times less expensive and 50 times more quicker to launch a solution than if you were to do it yourself. In terms of my background, I've spent, and when I say this, I sound ancient, but crikey, 20 years in the financial service space. The last, I would say, 10 years, pretty much in fintech banking as a service. I've worked predominantly for startups and scale-ups. My wife says that I would never survive in a large corporation because I'm too much of a maverick. I'm too much. I don't like to play by the rules. I think that's unfair and unkind, but she has a point. Spent 20 years in financial services and in fintech. I'm very passionate about this space because ultimately it allows me to do what I think I was born to do, which was to provide financial solutions and services to those that are underbanked and unbanked. And that is a particular passion of mine. So happy to be here and looking forward to this. Thank you.
Fantastic and welcome. And for listeners who are not watching this, because obviously it's a podcast, Jovi is indeed blessed by not looking half as old as his experience implies.
I've moved down to eating my vegetables and cocoa butter.
You must have been brought up very well. All right. So great to have all three of you join us. Thank you so much. So let's kick off by talking about some of the challenges that finance teams are facing going into 2025. So I think let's start with just very quick, a brief overview of some of the sort of big macroeconomic trends affecting businesses at the moment. And because you're sitting in Washington, D.C., Betsy, it kind of seems inevitable that I would throw this first question at you without going too far into politics. What do you think some of the challenges facing businesses around the world are today?
Well, I am going to completely avoid politics and focus on some things that are somewhat stable at the moment. So I think as it relates to the fintech space, all kidding aside, I think if you look at 2024, it was really the year of how do we continue to get funding to bring our visions to life. And when I look at 2025, I think that while that trend will certainly continue, I think the other trend that plays heavily into the economics of the space is transparency and controls. So the need, particularly here in the U.S., for organizations to be able to demonstrate that they are being diligent with funds that they are the guardians of, so to speak. I think we're going to see more and more of that and more scrutiny on a regulatory level about that very, very important topic of fidelity and soundness.
Jovi, do you agree? I mean, what do you think is sort of on the mind of sort of chief executives, people running sort of medium-sized businesses as they look at the world around them and think about their plans for this year?
I agree with Betsy, and I will be a little bit. And again, forgive me because I do like to throw in anecdotes. My former chief marketing officer always said, "Jovi, please, when you go on podcasts, try not to destroy the reputation of the firm, please." Because
no pressure.
So I will stray into politics a little bit, but I will be obviously polite. I think with the US and the second Trump administration, I think if you are a CEO, and you're on the finance team and you're looking at all of the headwinds and the trends, you need, for me, to throw out the typical rule books because, again, there are no rules now, and it's going to be a haphazard, chaotic, I would say, period of time. I would like to say that teams, the old cliche, teams should be agile, they should be data driven, but I think that applies to any situation and any scenario, whether you have the stability of a government or the instability of a government, whether you have periods of high inflation, low inflation, stickiness, high interest rates, shifting capital markets. I think all of these pressures, all of these conditions, the status quo must remain for me, which is you have to be agile and you have to make decisions based on data. Now, people may say that the data can be manipulated to support any particular theme or trend, but one should be agile, and one must make decisions based on data. And I think if you follow those two principles, then you can navigate pretty much any sort of trend that's going to be impacting businesses. I know that my team and the teams I've worked for in the past, they've always maintained agility and they've always maintained making decisions based on data. And I think if you follow that, you should be okay in any condition and in any scenario.
Thank you. Søren, what does this do to the sort of finance teams? What pressure does this put them under? I mean, if you've got sort of the uncertainty of politics, of wars, of tariff wars, does this mean that finance teams are just constantly having to rework scenarios? I mean, it's all very well for Jovi to say, hey, be agile, but actually, is it the finance teams then just have to work 24 hours a day? What does this mean for sort of finance teams, the kind of instability and uncertainty that sort of entering the economic environment?
Yeah, I think we can all agree that uncertainty is pretty high at the moment when we look back 10 years. And that is, of course, influencing also the agenda of the finance teams. I think in our survey, we say it's like 2/3 that says that the recessions and all the other macroeconomic factors that are happening at the moment is putting a lot of pressure on the CFO and the finance teams. And I would say, building a little bit on the point of Jovi here, I mean, first you need to handle the uncertainty. You need to think of agility. How do you build in agility in the business? How do you build in resilience in the business? Which I think is a pretty key one. And secondly, I would point to this dilemma of how do you balance growth versus efficiency and cash part, which, with the economy pointing in different directions, interest rate and inflation pointing in different direction, it's really a critical one to be agile around, but also having some real thoughts and having some scenarios in. And then finally, a little bit back to what Betsy also meant regarding the funding part. I mean, I do believe that, now is a very important time to tie up the funding part, but also if you believe that the ties are changing a little bit more towards growth in some parts of our industry, now is also the time to make sure that you have the funding required to do that. So I think there's a lot about handling this uncertainty, the balance between growth and efficiency, and then also thinking in the funding to unfold these things that are really critical, given the situation.
Thank you. Jovi, I'd love to come back to you on that point you make about agility, because I think we're all used to agile software development. We're all used to the concept of taking those sort of agile practices as you work on sort of projects, develop new products, and so on. But that agile thinking hasn't always permeated all the way through to sort of finance teams, particularly in bigger companies where there's still sort of 2-year budgets and 5-year ROI models and all that kind of stuff. If we're truly to see companies becoming more agile, does that mean changes in the way you do financial planning, do you think?
Absolutely agree. We need to see a lot more ways in terms of how finance teams make changes. I had the pleasure to download the Pleo report yesterday, via the instructions, and I thought I better read this report to make sure I come into this conversation well versed. And I've made some slight notes, and if 87% of businesses said have cut spending in the last 18 months, but nearly half of them regret it. And again, I will go back to my previous CMO, Nadia, who I love. And she's always said, Jovi, stop quoting The Sopranos at podcast, which I tend to do. And in The Sopranos, Tony says, more is lost through indecision than wrong decision. And I think that's imperative, so when finance teams are building, their plans and their projects and they have a time horizon, you see there, the stats, they've made the decision to cut costs and they've regretted it. But for me, the key isn't just about cutting costs. It's about being a hell of a lot smarter. You have to spend smarter. And I think finance teams can remain resilient, whilst also being smart and making sure that they can adjust and pivot based on the uncertainty and the economic conditions. So that to me is key.
Well, and I would just add to that what Jovi is saying, that in these kinds of times where there is, a fair amount of instability and where you do have to be agile, for me, the key to being agile is alignment among your teams. So from the finance to legal to marketing, are we all clear on what our common goals are? And those might be 90-day OKRs, they might be a year or beyond. But if you're continuing to have those conversations on a regular basis, then you're in a much better position to know where you are at that moment and how you may need to pivot. And to Jovi's point about The Sopranos, which as a born and bred New Jerseyite, it feels very true to me. You can make better informed decisions, and you aren't paralyzed by a feeling that you don't have enough information.
And if I may, sorry, Benjamin, if I may, Betsy, on that point about communication and collaboration, do you think, or do you believe sometimes that can in itself be a problem if there are too many cooks in the kitchen, and again, leading by consensus? Perhaps you need someone to say, okay, look, these are the goals. This is what we need to achieve. Everybody must go to it, rather than each person thinking, oh, well, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to cut this, we need to cut that.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, but when I say communication, it's to rally around a common set of objectives. So how I might execute upon those from a marketing perspective and someone else might from a product perspective, those two things are going to differ. But to be able to move quickly, we always have to keep those key objectives in mind, and making sure, on a fairly frequent basis, let's all go back to the original objectives, and make sure we're all still, singing from the same hymn sheet.
So, Søren, on that point, how can finance directors really try and make sure they are on the same hymn sheet? Because we're talking about sometimes businesses obviously need to cut costs, they need to manage their spending and so on. How do finance directors work effectively with other business leaders to define, which spending is maybe a little bit wasteful and which spending is absolutely vital to the future growth and prospects of the company? Because presumably every business leader is coming to the finance director and saying, well, you've got to spend on my department. My initiative is obviously the priority. How do finance directors handle some of that?
Yeah, I think I think some of the key thing here is to make sure you have the data transparency in order, and that you align on the KPIs that are critical for decision making. So I think once you start getting that right and align that across the company, you can also have sort of like the same standards you held the organization accountable for. There are some return on investment requirements, etc. And as a working formally in an e-commerce company, when I discussed with the CMO on budgets, I actually said, I don't really care what your budget is. Demonstrate two things for me. One is, what's the overall return that you are delivering? And tell me and show me that you are in control of the outlier. So you're the worst performing campaigns, etc. As long as the overall are fine and you are in control of the outliers, I don't really care if you spend twice your budget, because I know, we have aligned on data, we have aligned on the criteria for how we measure return, and from that on, then the more you spend under these circumstances or these frames, the better for the company. So I think digging into some of these things, making sure that foundation and those criteria are really lived and are applied across the company, I think that can go a long way.
So that's really interesting because what you're saying is actually very closely aligned with what Betsy's saying, which is not surprising because you're obviously just listening to each other. But you're really saying a lot of this is actually about just really aligning on what the objectives are, agreeing what you're doing, and then really making sure you're measuring your achievement of your objectives, and so that everyone understands what's being spent, why it's being spent, and what return you're generating on that or not.
I would totally agree. Just to chime in there on that particular thought, that we as the leadership of a company are the stewards of that money. And so when we need money for marketing, we need money for product, we need money for global expansion, we need to come to the table, so to speak, with our data. To me, it's incumbent upon whatever the function is to come with Søren, what can the business expect from this particular investment? And why is my investment where we should be spending the money? And that is not to preclude others from also spending money, but everybody should come with with a very prepared argument and really clear data to demonstrate what their investment will bring to the business.
And if I may add that it's equally as important that we talk about data. So a lot of this is data driven. And teams, all the teams, finance teams, product teams, operation teams, I believe, and Evolve especially here, what we do is that in real time, each team can see the impact of their spending. And I think that's important, and again, as Betsy mentioned, if everyone can all sing off the same hymn sheet and they can all refer back to the same data points so they can see in real time the impact of the spending, I think it makes it a lot easier so teams don't, or rather finance teams do not get caught between risk aversion versus strategic investments. And that's what we try to do. Well, at least I've been told what we try to do at Volt.
Søren, this sounds magnificent. I mean, I think there's probably all sorts of people listening to this saying it would be amazing if we could see the real-time impact of our spending. And I'm sure there are finance teams that are striving to achieve that. But how do you get towards that ideal of being able to see where spending is going and what effect you're having?
Yeah, so reality for many companies is, that there is still some work to be done to be in a position where you just have this information flowing in exactly the right format. But I think, if you make those investments in data and you have the business discussion around, not only the importance of having the data, but also the criteria and KPIs by which you're measuring, you're coming a long way. And then it's about starting from the end. What are what is the most critical decisions that the business needs to take in order to grow and win in the market, and take them from in a certain order to get it done. And I can just speak from experience also coming from this, former companies where, data foundation was very strong on the revenue side of things, but there was a complete lack of understanding what it meant from profitability. And we chewed down that way and gradually fixed all the items going into it. And the realization quickly was that, 50% of our product drove 80% of the revenue and 99% of the profit, which also meant implicitly that 50% of our product was net, not bringing anything to the business. And then you can have the dialogues about how do you fix that? Do you stop something? That's a journey you need to be on, because not all companies are in the privileged situation to just have it up and running at the time. But it's definitely worth the effort to get it done and start in a prioritized manner.
Indeed. There's one sort of elephant in the room that I want to bring up of your company. The three companies you're working at all sound amazing, and I'm sure all the companies you've ever worked at have all been perfect, and everyone has been wonderful. But occasionally in companies you come across, a big ego or multiple big egos and so on, and personality starts to get into the way. how do you overcome some of those challenges? I mean, Betsy, I don't know if you've ever come across this in conversations with other people of a company that's not run optimally because the decision makers aren't rational, because there's sort of big egos, there's people sort of bullying other people, or what people who are listening in that kind of company. I mean, can you get to the ideal that Søren and Jovi are talking about?
Well, let me say I can imagine a situation like that, and imagine situations, in my prior life before Thread, where I'm happy to report that we're all very aligned on objectives. But regardless, even when you are aligned, you're going to have disagreements and friction. And particularly when you're talking about marketing, it is often the other elephant in the room is marketing is often the first place you want to go to, let's get, oh, good, look at that money sitting over there. Let's just stop that, right? And because it is attractive, it is, can often be a chunk of money that seems easy to spend. And I think because marketing can seem softer, it again makes it seem like an attractive place to go. So I would encourage, any part of the team, whether it's the marketing part or the finance part, to take a pause and dig into the data that we were just talking about, because it may be that data is not necessarily where you can see the results right now. Like, where are those new sales? Why isn't it happening right now? Well, it is a process. And I would remind everyone to stick to those key indicators, because so many of them are leading indicators. And you don't want to, cut off your nose to spite your face down the line. That, what we might cut now that seems very easy, and it's just some of that, marketing, pretty looking stuff, and isn't that cute? It will have real downstream effect, that if you go back to that data, you can see that if we have fewer MQLs, or if our awareness of the Thread brand, I mean, we have it in real time, where we have changed our name in the last, not even 2 years. We have to be able to demonstrate that building that awareness will lead to more leads, will lead to deals that move through the funnel, and will lead, most importantly, to clients that feel proud to rely on our services. But it is a journey and a process, and all roads lead back to data, and trying very hard to have calm conversations about the facts behind whatever the function is.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's take a quick breather before we explore how we sort of bridge some of those gaps and strengthen collaboration across teams in the ways you were just talking about, Betsy. Please don't go away, listeners, because getting these kind of things right could be the difference between success and failure for your companies. Okay, quick break.
Cybersecurity is the top concern for UK businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, centralize security workflows, complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synthesia, and Alicabank, who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.
Average is not invited. Not if you're holding your company off-site in Las Vegas. We aren't on friendly terms with the bare minimum, and unenthusiastic is uninvited. Las Vegas's creative energy and world-class hospitality want to bring your company off-site to crazy new heights. That's why fear-based leadership is afraid of Vegas, and boring won't be there, but it will be watching the meeting recordings later. Plan for the extraordinary at vegasmeansbusiness.com.
Welcome back to FinTech Insider Insights in association with Pleo. For the rest of today's show, we're breaking down the barriers that often leave finance teams feeling like the geeky group siloed off from the rest of the organization. What's the cause of this communication gap? Is there any tangible return on investment if we can fix some of these issues? So, Søren, I'd love to come to you first. What are some of the behaviors from other departments that sometimes we see that can cause friction to finance departments? I mean, we were talking about it a little bit just before the break, but what are some of the things that came up through in the report or some of the things you've come across in your career?
Yeah, so I think one of the key points that stands out for me is the feeling of not being involved, not getting the transparency from the business. And also the report indicate that around 65% of the finance community, experience, the business being territorial and refusing to share and being transparent. And I think it fundamentally comes down to the business feeling that either the finance team don't really understand the business, that they are no-sayers, or they, don't have the urgency to prioritize the business need. So I think, instead of just accepting, you can say that, this, I think you need to dig a little bit into, what is underneath and what is it we as a finance team need to, think about and potentially do better to bring ourselves into the discussions.
Do you think there's a sort of outdated perception that finance is sort of basically accounting, it's basically bookkeeping, it's a non-strategic, it's just like as a back office function?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that exists out there. To be completely honest, I think also in the report there's an indication that roughly three out of four finance teams feels they are treated like a back office function, doing admin and stuff like that. But the counter argument that I would give is, honestly, it's really up to ourselves as a finance team. Don't sit around and wait. You need to be out there earning the stripes to be involved also. And I think that's a mindset thing, which is really important in what you want to achieve as a finance team. That you need to bring yourself into play. You need to demonstrate that you add value. You help the business with something, and then of course also you need these other things like being the guardian of integrity and cost control and all that. But if you don't bring the first part of it, it's quite difficult. And in my experience, 98-99% of all employees, all departments, they go to work because they want to do well. So you need to start with what can I do to bring them on board and make the corporation work.
Yeah, I'd like to, sorry, Benjamin, if I may, I'd like to follow on from that, Søren, because again, I agree with everything you've pretty much said. I said at the beginning that I haven't worked for larger organizations because I think, the structure and the restrictions placed on my personality wouldn't jive well. And the largest organization that I've worked for has been 700 employees. And I imagine in much larger organizations, you're going to have silos. And I believe that collaboration is absolutely the key here. And for me, what I've seen, the biggest issue has been visibility. Teams operating in silos. So again, I've worked for mid-sized companies, and even then, everyone operated in their own specific silos with no visibility as to what is going on into different functions and different departments. And Søren, again, your report, the Pleo report, was actually quite insightful, and I say that respectfully. And as you mentioned, 65% of businesses have said that they would have made better decisions if they had better collaboration, which to me is just crazy. Collaboration it's very simple to do, but also very hard to execute. I also do believe, though, that the finance tools that we have isn't built today for agile decision-making needs. And that's something that also from a tech perspective that we can improve upon. if teams gain that real-time oversight of cash flow, of expenses, of liquidity across departments, it's going to allow them to make far better decisions vis-a-vis finances. And again, it's such a little thing to do, but the impact for me is great. But yeah, I agree, Søren.
So you've got two really interesting points there. One point is the point about sort of improving collaboration and really breaking down silos. And then the second one is about, just better systems, better sort of digital systems and better insights. Betsy, maybe I could bring you in on that, on the first one, that you go on to the second one as well. But the first one about collaboration, I mean, how do you get that sort of better collaboration between the senior executives? In particular, how does the finance director, the CFO, the treasurer, whatever the title is, the senior finance people, how do they really earn the respect of the product line leaders, the marketers, the technologists, all the other senior leaders in an organization?
Well, as Søren was saying earlier, I think it's really important to assume good intent, whether I'm in marketing and I'm looking at the finance team or the legal team or whatever team, that people come to work primarily to do a good job. And if we can look at other departments with that in mind, that's a good starting point. From there, I would say it's the execution of collaboration that Jovi was mentioning that is essential. So at Thread, one of the things we do is in our monthly all hands call, right after our CEO, Jim McCarthy, talks, our CFO, Jeff Burns, gets up and gives what some in the original months we did this, a real primer about what are the key drivers that we care about as a business. And Jeff has taken it upon himself, and Sean and others on our team that have ongoing discovery sessions where we say, come and learn more about, P&L and what drives the bottom line. That taking that initiative from the finance team to demystify the terms that, what's COGS, what's this, what's that. The more that people are brought on board with that conversation, the more that gets embedded into their thinking, and people can make that connection between, oh boy, what I spend over here, boy, that does directly impact the bottom line. Or, oh, I see now why the finance team is asking me questions about this. It's very important that we stick to our forecast, and that then enables our investors to feel good about their investment. So that kind of collaborative journey is so important, and it takes everybody taking some initiative to bring the company along.
Thank you. Søren, how much of this is about these sort of issues of sort of personality and collaboration, as Betsy and Jovi have just been talking, and how much is it also the sort of technology piece to Jovi's earlier point about, well, if you can't see the numbers, if you can't measure it?
Yeah, I think to me it's something that stands on three legs. Where, first you need to agree, as we discussed earlier, about the data and the shared goals and all that. Then there's an element of the tools and the systems and so on, because honestly, cooperation and leaning in takes time. So you need to also make sure you automate some of the more tedious time, so you have the time to invest. And then thirdly, there's an element of what you can call mindset or nature, and that's it's something you can actually recruit and encourage, and you can actually, when talking about a town hall discussion, you bring forward some of the great examples of something great getting done in the organization, and it was because of the way we cooperated. So really, bringing forward the heroes that are reaching out and bringing teams together and getting things done together, because that's often how the great results are being achieved. So to me, it's like a little bit like three legs that needs to go hand in hand to bring it in, and the data is one side, the tools, the automation is one side, and then the mindset and the culture or behavior is the third very critical component.
I love that. So data, tools, culture, That's probably good advice for a whole set of business problems, actually, not just this, not just this one. So Betsy, I mean, I love that point about the town halls and the CFO really playing a much more strategic role in the organization. I mean, is that one of our sort of big messages actually back out to finance teams? Is be who you want to be in your organization. If you're not strategic, you won't be seen as strategic, and then you won't. You have to kind of earn that role. Is that?
I completely agree, and regardless of the function, I think that's whether it's finance or legal or procurement, as we build those relationships internally, I think that's very important. And regardless of what area you're in, but at least since we're talking about finance, if you're in the finance team and you are able to articulate how your role plays into the health and objectives of achieving the objectives of the company, all the better. And if you can do that just as part of your day-to-day conversations, I know that many companies have gone, very much remote first. At Thread, we really encourage people to come into the office on a regular basis, because sometimes it's just a matter of, finance team or whatever team, make sure you're not just all sitting together all the time. Go and sit out among the business, or if you're in a remote environment, how about just reaching out to the organizations that that you might be perceived as policing, but rather before the conversation gets heated, to establish relationships and establish that baseline understanding of, here's why I'm asking you these questions. People are then much more likely to be able to work through those potentially more difficult situations.
Betsy, if I may, we started the conversation saying we would stray away from politics, and Benjamin mentioned about egos. If you've got somebody in finance and they've got a good strategic mind, and they want to speak out to offer insights, but they have somebody at the top who is very strong and belligerent, let's say, for example, Donald Trump or Elon Musk, how would
if I had those answers, I would probably not be on this podcast.
But how would one sort of tackle that very, maybe not intimidating, but dominating ego at the top?
Well, I'll give you my advice from past experience. And some of this comes from, I've raised some kids that had from the foster care system. Sometimes you have to work with that energy, and it could be very negative, and not immediately get defensive and feel like I have to fight this energy, but rather, taking a pause, trying to understand, because I do think most people are rational somewhere deep down there, how coming to a joint decision is going to benefit both or all three parties, but to trying to understand where that potentially difficult person is coming from and appeal to their desire to get what it is that they're trying to do. In the case of kids, get their dessert, get their allowance, and try to, really embrace, since we're using pop culture, that help me help you mentality, to say, like, look, I hear where you're trying to go. Let me understand where you're trying to go. If we do this, I think we'll be able to get there faster.
Søren, sorry, I love that. I think it's really interesting, and it's challenging thinking about really dominant personalities, isn't it? I love that point about harnessing their energy and trying to think about where you can try and sort of direct that in a way that benefits everybody. Søren, I wanted to bring you back in on this point about collaboration and sort of driving collaborations in organizations, because Betsy's made the interesting point about of course there's lots of remote working in companies. I'm sure many of us and many of our listeners have worked in companies that are distributed around the globe, or at least distributed across multiple offices, and that kind of those silos naturally form in organizations. I think human beings are intensely a bit tribal. It takes time to form relationships, so silos are maybe a little bit natural. How Søren, do you think companies and individuals can sort of break down silos and collaborate more effectively?
Yeah, there are things you can do structurally, the way you organize teams and etc. And then there is something related to the softer side about culture and mindset, where there's also an element of leading by example and putting forward. I always try to promote, a true partnership between my finance teams and the business. And what I always told them about when they ask, so how does a great finance business partner look like? Yeah, I'm saying, it's someone who has their heart in the business and their minds belongs to the finance side. And when you're out there with the team, you need to feel like you are part of that team that you are supporting. And that is in a role where you will both act as a challenger, because that's part of what you need to do, but also in a role where the business actually feels that there are things being moved away from the table. There are fewer things on the plate for them when you have been there. So I think a lot of it comes down to how you of course draw the structure on the map, but also how you drive the you can say the mentality and the encourage behavior. And I think, in my experience, having been CFO in 5 companies now, there's a quite good relation between the financial success of a company and how well actually finance and the business work together. I found that there's a correlation, which is also I see supported by this survey that we've done, that is almost like 3 out of 4 that see this correlation.
That definitely makes sense, given everything we've talked about today, and I think everything that all of us sort of came into this call already knowing. Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so one last question for the three of you. Just as it's a little bit hard to avoid talking about Elon Musk or Donald Trump, it's also a little bit hard to avoid talking about artificial intelligence. Do we think AI is going to help improve collaboration, improve the sort of effectiveness of sort of financial planning and spend management for companies over the next year? Maybe Søren, let's start with you. You said earlier about part of the challenge for finance teams is automating all the boring stuff so you can spend time on the important things. Is AI going to help?
Absolutely, yes. That's my short answer, and I can't resist bringing the Pleo as an example of this. So. Spend management, some of the things that help is, immediately the system tells you that, hey, by the way, there are 3 employees in that is subscribing to the same service, we need to look into that, benchmark, an AI generated benchmark among all the customers, where it's simply saying, for a service company in Germany, you're spending 20% more on travel expenses than these kind of things becomes, much easier to have available with the right tools. And I think it will help shape many things, including in the spend management side specifically.
Love it. Jovi?
100%. AI will help, but I don't think it's all about AI. What you'll find, again, in my opinion, is that AI can enhance insights. But for me, the real transformation takes place when teams, specifically finance teams, can move away from manual processes to automated, and from a Vault perspective, on-chain finance operations. Those two coupled together, and I think you have chef's kiss.
Fantastic. Betsy?
I agree wholeheartedly with what both Søren and Jovi were saying. It's the collaboration of AI with the people, and being able to leverage the insights to be able to move the conversation forward. Neither exist in a vacuum, and you need all of those tools working in concert to be effective.
Well said. Well, thank you all so much. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. Although we've been talking about finance and collaboration in finance, I think actually we probably shared a number of lessons about just collaboration more widely. So I hope all of our listeners have found it as useful as I have. So thank you so much to the three of you for sharing your insights. It'd be great if you could tell our listeners a little bit about where they can find a bit more about you and what you're up to. And Søren, be good in particular if you could also mention where people can find the report.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, you can find my contacts on LinkedIn, being CFO of Pleo. And if you're also curious to learn more about Pleo or the analytics, you can go to pleo.io for more information.
And Betsy, where can people find out a little bit more about you and about Thread?
Also for me as well as for Søren, Betsy Samuel on LinkedIn is where you can find me. And if you want to learn more about how card issuer processing can help your business, you can find us at www.thread.com for more information.
And Jovi, how about you and Volt?
Equally, on LinkedIn, you can find me Jovi Overo. That's Jovi as in John Bon, and Overo, Overo. You'll find my name on LinkedIn next to a tumbler of a scotch. So for those who want, Macallan 25, please feel free. To find out more about Vault, VAULT, you can find us on online, vault.ist. So if you're looking to launch a crypto BaaS solution, vault.ist, and we'll be happy to have a conversation.
And you can find me, Benjamin Ensor, on LinkedIn, or you can find out what the team are up to at 11fs.com. Thank you all so much for listening. Please do follow our podcast. Do leave us a review. Let us know what you'd like to hear about in future shows. If you want to join the conversation, seek us on social media. Just search for 11FS or FinTech Insider, or you can email us at podcasts@11fs.com. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Cybersecurity is the top concern for UK businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, centralize security workflows, complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synthesia, and Alica Bank who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.